So picture this. It's 1937, and China is a nation on the absolute edge of collapse. The country's fractured, totally divided, and it's about to be thrown into this incredibly brutal conflict that won't just reshape the country, it's going to set the stage for the world we live in right now. This is the story of the war that forged a new China.
You know, to really get the feel for the time, you just have to hear these words. They're from a song called The March of the Volunteers. And man, it became this massive rallying cry all over the country. It was this promise of total, absolute resistance. This song was so powerful, it eventually became China's official national anthem.
But you gotta understand, this united front was a brand new thing. For years, China had been ripping itself apart with internal conflict. The leader of the nationalists, Chiang Kai-shek, was arguably more worried about fighting Mao Zedong's communists than he was about the Japanese, who had already taken over Manchuria. He was trying to buy time, you see, but time had just run out. So what was the spark that lit the fuse? It all went down on July 7th, 1937, at a place called the Marco Polo Bridge, right near Beijing. A tiny little dispute about a Japanese soldier who supposedly went missing, well, that just spiraled into the exact excuse Japan was looking for. This wasn't a skirmish anymore, this was a full-blown invasion.
Okay, so Chiang Kai-shek's response here is a wild gamble. Instead of fighting the Japanese up in the north, he deliberately opens up a whole new front, hundreds of miles away in Shanghai. Now, his thinking was pretty clever in a way. Shanghai was the most international city in Asia. By fighting there, he could force the entire world to pay attention. And you know what? It worked. The battle was enormous. 1 million soldiers slugging it out street by street, destroying the city right in front of all these foreign observers.
But here's the thing, just because the world was watching, it didn't mean anyone was going to step in to help. After Shanghai fell, the Japanese army marched straight for the capital, Nanking. What happened next? It's just one of the absolute darkest moments of the 20th century. We're talking about the rape of Nanking. For 6 long weeks, the city was subjected to just unspeakable violence. The scale of the killing was just staggering. It was a story of pure horror that shocked the world, but nobody did a thing to intervene. So the capital is gone, but the war, it is far from over. It was just shifting into a new, even more desperate phase, a grim, grinding war of attrition where, honestly, just surviving was victory.
This puts the nationalists in an impossible position. I mean, really, how do you stop an army that has better training, better equipment, and total control of the air? Well, their answer would turn out to be both desperate and completely catastrophic.
Their solution was to turn nature itself into a weapon. The plan was as bold as it was terrifyingly simple. They were going to deliberately break the dams holding back the massive Yellow River and just let a flood swallow up the entire Japanese invasion force. It was an all-or-nothing move, with millions of lives hanging in the balance. 500,000 people. Just let that sink in. That was the price of this gamble. The estimated number of Chinese civilians who died. This wasn't some natural disaster. This was inflicted by their own government. Millions more lost their homes. And the real kick in the teeth, it didn't even work. The Japanese army just took a detour. So after another major city, Wuhan, falls, the nationalists have no choice but to retreat. They fall back 500 miles, way deep into the interior, and set up a new capital in Chongqing. The Japanese army, now totally overstretched and exhausted, couldn't push any further. The war just grinds to this horrifying stalemate. It's basically a meat grinder, and nobody can see a way out. Now, for years, China was pretty much fighting this war all by itself. But then, December 7th, 1941 happens. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, and in an instant, everything changes. This wasn't just about America entering the war. It immediately turned the Sino-Japanese War into a major front in World War II. And just like that, China has a seriously powerful new friend. American aid starts flooding in. We're talking over $1.5 billion in supplies. They're flown in over the treacherous Himalayan mountains on a route the pilots called the Hump. You had legendary volunteer pilots, the Flying Tigers, battling it out in the skies. And on the ground, famously tough American generals like Vinegar Joe Stilwell showed up to advise the Chinese army. So on the world stage, China's looking better than ever. Chiang Kai-shek is now sitting at the table with Roosevelt and Churchill, one of the big 4 Allied leaders. But this picture of strength, it was a total illusion.
While the leaders were meeting in Cairo, back home, the nationalist government was literally collapsing from the inside. And the reasons why are pretty straightforward and pretty ugly. The economy was in an absolute freefall. Hyperinflation meant money was basically worthless paper. Corruption was everywhere, with officials getting rich while their own soldiers starved. And what does that lead to? A totally demoralized army, with desertions going through the roof. The whole government was rotting from the core. So, Japan surrenders in August 1945, and you'd think that means peace for China, right? Nope. What it actually did was create this giant power vacuum. That uneasy truce that had existed between the nationalists and the communists, instantly over. It's like two different futures for China were about to go head-to-head in a battle for the soul of the nation. And man, these two sides could not have been more different. You look at it on paper and you think, okay, the nationalists have this in the bag. They had American aid, a bigger army, but they were crippled by corruption and had completely lost the trust of the people. The communists, on the other hand, had Soviet support, sure, but their real strength came from the ground up. They promised land to the peasants, they became masters of guerrilla warfare, and they slowly but surely earned the loyalty of the countryside. The Americans, they tried to play peacemaker. Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek actually sat down for talks, but it was a total non-starter. As Chiang himself supposedly said, there cannot be two suns in the sky. In 1946, that fragile peace just shattered and all-out civil war began. And what comes next isn't some long, grinding war. No, this was fast, and it was decisive. It was a struggle that would end with one side completely wiped out and a new China rising from the ashes. I mean, just look at how fast this all happens. In late 1948, the communists launched 3 huge campaigns. In just a few months, they take all of Manchuria. They inflict 500,000 casualties on the nationalists in a single campaign, and then they capture the huge cities of Tianjin and Beijing. By April of 1949, even the nationalist capital Nanking was gone. The nationalist army was completely broken. The nationalists are on the run, and really, the final chapter is about to be written. On October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong stands in front of this massive crowd in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, and he declares the birth of a brand new state, the People's Republic of China. So what about Chiang Kai-shek? Well, he, along with what was left of his government and about 2 million of his followers, fled the mainland. They retreated to the island of Taiwan, where they set up a rival government. And this sets up the whole political situation that, well, is still a huge deal today. When you step back and look at the human cost of all of this, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. From the start of the Japanese invasion to the end of the Civil War, somewhere around 20 million Chinese people died. To give you some perspective, only the Soviet Union lost more people during all of World War II. So a new China is born, right? Forged in all this fire and bloodshed and civil war. And that leaves us with the big question, one that echoes right down to today. How could such a profoundly traumatic birth not shape the nation it was destined to become?